330 million merchants. All of these guys will know about LankaPay now. Instead of a single entity connecting to individual banks in a particular time, the easier way is to connect to a central switch. I think the digital signatures act is there for more than a decade, but how many of us know about digital signatures? How many of us actively use it?
From its beginnings as a check clearing house, the company now called LankaPay has evolved to become a payments and settlements network. It's now going global by connecting Sri Lanka's payments network to the region. To discuss these global ambitions in the studio here with us is Kenneth De Zilwa, LankaPay's chairman. Kenneth, welcome to Echelon. Let's start with the big picture, right? What's the new vision for LankaPay? I mean, LankaPay has done tremendous amount of work in the last few years. What is this new vision?
Thank you for having me, Shamindra. Well, the new vision stems from the fact that what we are trying to do is what we are trying to see in terms of our core capacity and our core business. What are we doing well? Based on that, we have done a comparative analysis and seen that these products are not only products that can be used by Sri Lankans alone. These are fairly kind of easy to transmit products and services to other parts of the world, particularly Asia, where we are seeing a lot of traction in the tech space and the fintech space as well. So this disruptive technology is now part and parcel of a global framework and a global business cycle that we are all part of. So based on that, we have taken a conscious decision to look at beyond the borders of Sri Lanka, and hence the idea to go global. And that's the kind of vision that we are kind of mapped out, and we are gearing LankaPay to partner other countries as part of this overall strategy to become a regional as well as a global player. So initially, our phase one would be to look at regional integrations with other similar payments and settlement entities across multiple countries. And towards that end, we have now taken a fairly significant step forward by becoming a member at the Asian Payments Network. It's APN, which comprises of 13 countries. And also we have been now appointed as the co-chair for these 13 countries, which is a significant step in the overall strategic plan that we have carved out for the company. So that's in a nutshell what we're trying to do in terms of our new reorientation of the company. We're trying to move into the region, trying to see what markets we can access, and as a result of that, we're trying to see what are the services that can be exported to the other countries and vice versa, where we can also have a benefit to the economy, where countries that are having tourists also coming through and B2B transactions take place, which is a broader kind of a strategy that will benefit some of the Sri Lankan companies also doing business with global partners.
Explain this to us, Kenneth. Now, LankaPay isn't a company that's offering a single product or a single service. In Sri Lanka, LankaPay started as Lanka Clear, doing the check clearing, which you continue to do. But since you've done common ATM switch, you've launched the SWIFT network, where you can transfer money between banks, you have Lanka QR, there are several products. So paint the picture for us. When you say you want to go global and link with regional networks, which of these LankaPay net products or services are you linking?
Right. So you're right. Remember, we have been 20 years in operation. We started off as an initial clearing house just to facilitate clearing. But this clearing is predominantly check clearing. Now,
Sure.
Clearing as a concept has not died because asset management companies and global asset management, the investment banking side of it, you find a lot of derivatives being settled via clearing. So that's one side of it. We are seriously looking at how we can reposition the clearing aspect, moving away from checks because the infrastructure would remain the same. So that's one. Second point is these products are catered to different segments of society.
Sure.
For example, the QR is there for more retail, more SME type of transactions where putting up a POS machine is technically costly. So the QR facilitates that type of ecosystem where it's the more retail, more SME, as I told you, driven business model. So we are catering to the low end of the pyramid in that sense. The more affluent society and the more affluent stratas will go in for SEF transactions, which is online payments and etc. So we have got multiple products under a single rail catering to different client segments or corporate segments, and that's the similar type of approach we are looking at in terms of our global strategy. How do we look at the synergies that we have here, and how can we take it across to many of the other countries which either have not developed fully or they are developed fully and where we can benefit by a strategic alliance. So we have a central switch instead of a single entity connecting to individual banks in a particular time. The easier way is to connect to a central switch. That way you get central access to all the banks in one go. So that's how LankaPay kind of has the benefit of being at the focal point of this payment and settlement system. Similarly, other countries also have a similar infrastructure.
Sure.
So if banks want to connect to another bank in, say, let's say Thailand, the easiest route would be to connect to the central switch, a similar entity like ours, and then you have multiple access to multiple touch points.
Sure.
And that's the type of thinking, and that brings your costs also significantly low, because each time you integrate with a bank, it's a significant cost. It's in 200,000-300,000 region dollars. So significant cost, but if you connect to a switch, it's a one-time fee that you connect, and then you're open to doing business with multiple entities in that country.
So when somebody travels or does business, instead of using a credit card, if they're traveling individually, they can just use their bank account to make payments in a different country.
Yes, you could do that. So there is multiple ways you could do that. One is the credit card, as you said, it works through an international payment gateway system, but the other cost of doing business is expensive.
Exactly.
Then you have a second method of doing business, which is also a cheaper way, which is the debit card. Which LankaPay has also launched its own debit card that also enable people to use the debit card in multiple locations at a lower transaction cost. The transaction cost generally is captured by way of a merchant discount rate. In technical terms, it's the MDR. An MDR for a credit card transaction is about 3%, maybe slightly more depending on the card issuer. But the debit card, the general MDR is about 1%, particularly the LankaPay debit card, which we have teamed up with JCB. It's a global card. So it has multi-functions embedded into it. One of the functions is the point where you can use it as a mere debit card and withdraw money from a ATM across multiple jurisdictions. So that's the other side. We are also trying to look at a more efficient way of doing transactions cross-border by just a simple SEF type of a transfer where you can have account-to-account transfers. So we're trying to work on that. That will come in subsequently once we get in through the APN.
Tell us why you think this is a big deal. Why is LankaPay going global a big deal?
Well, I mean, it's not really a big deal, but it's a big deal in the sense that we are the national payments and settlements entity, and we have to create an environment where it will enable other entities and banks to use our services, products and services for their own benefit. So we are technically playing a dual role. We are a profit organization. Our shareholder structure, if you look at it, is a classic case of a PPP, where the state has a 48% stake and the private sector 52%. So we are predominantly run as a private sector entity. So we are creating these opportunities for the businesses in Sri Lanka to go overseas, transact. And when I say transaction costs are critical in the business world today, particularly given the competition. And we are trying to see how best we can minimize these transaction costs. Classic example is, for example, we have started a facility quite some time. Now, of course, it makes more sense to look at it seriously. We have a internal dollar settlement clearing that we run, where transactions from one entity in the country to another can be net settled, and then there is one transaction that goes to your Nostro account. Now, routing it through LankaPay and doing a net settlement via this mechanism, the transaction is only $1.
Wow, right. And contrast also how this is likely to impact costs of other transactions. You talked about credit cards versus debit cards, how it's different. If you give us some broad ideas about what it'll be like.
In terms of the credit card, obviously it's a credit instrument.
Sure.
So you pay later.
Sure.
Whereas a debit card is immediate debit to you. So
Sure.
you need to have the cash, whereas in the credit card, you don't need to have the cash. So therefore, there is a credit risk element, whereas in the debit card, you don't have a credit risk element. And therefore, the transaction cost should technically be lower. But unfortunately, it has not happened, and that's what we're trying to address. And I think central bank also is very, very conscious about the cost factors given the tough times that this country is also going through. And I think everyone in the banking sector also realize there is merit in terms of looking at how to make these particular payment mechanisms more affordable and more accessible.
To transform the thinking in an organization from looking inwards for opportunity to one that starts looking outwards is an inflection. It's an inflection point. What was the trigger? How did this come about at LankaPay?
Good question. I mean, to me, I was always sitting outside the system looking at payments and settlements because I came from an investment banking background. And it's always question as to why do we need to have a cutoff time at 3 o'clock to make a bank payment? Why can't we have it? Because we are talking about a night economy.
Sure.
And to have a functional night economy, you need to have payment systems working,
Sure.
right? How these people have to carry cash. So that was the first starting point where I type of question the rationality of having only a single clearing type of arrangement, and why not have multiple settlement periods where transactions could be settled right throughout the day. So that was the first step. The second point to this was when we looked at Lanka Clear in its origins, as you pointed out earlier, it was just a mere clearing function. We had a fairly strong team with good technical skills, but we were still not sure of where the company needed to go. And I mean that there are multiple reasons. I mean, I don't want to go there, but it was a more back office function where we were dependent on banks taking us out to market.
Right.
So if you see, some of the products have been there since 2007, 2009, and these are fairly established products, but still no traction. Classic case is the digital signatures. Right? Digital signatures. I think the Digital Signatures Act, which was tabled and passed in Parliament in 2006, and subsequently amended again, is there for more than a decade now. But how many of us know about digital signatures? How many of us actively use it? I mean, you and I know that. It's only now that after we kind of re-looked at our business strategy and our business model and said, no, we should be leading the technology because banks have got other priorities in their own space, and therefore those priorities are not necessarily aligned with the broader context of what's happening in the technological space. So we consciously looked at that and repositioned the company to look at outward and to be a leader in technology, because that's our capability and that's our capacity to be an enabler by being a leader in technology and being the eyes for the country. Because you need to have an organization that looks at the horizon and says, this is happening out there. How can we be part of it, or how can we benefit, or how can we tap into this, right? And you have to do it actively, because if no one is doing it, you get left behind. And technology is changing at such a rapid pace, particularly in the Asian region. You need to keep up with it. And so there needs to be an entity that does this for the country and also drives that particular change process in the country. And I think that's what LankaPay has now positioned itself at. And I think it has won some respect in that regard. I mean, it's a long way to go because we have just started this journey, and I think we're making some good traction. And I think there is a lot of positive energy on the table, and people also are reciprocating well because we see that there are people out there who want to partner LankaPay now. Uh, Two such large entities have joined us. One was, I can tell you now, China UnionPay has already integrated with us to enable their clients who come into Sri Lanka, particularly Chinese tourists, to have access to our QR network. It's a phenomenal achievement because there are 480 million customers in China UnionPay, 330 million merchants. All of these guys will know about LankaPay now because we have done a co-branded arrangement where both our logos are displayed on their phones as part of their awareness, and soon we'll find the logos of UnionPay as well as LankaPay being displayed at several merchant outlets. So that's the good side of it. Similarly, we have tied up with NPCI, that is the National Payments Council of India. They are also trying to bring in their card integration into Sri Lanka, and we are making good, steady progress on that front. Hopefully, by end of July, I think we will integrate into that framework, and that will also give us another significant amount of traffic that is coming through, and the country will benefit. So I think that's the type of synergy you need to have, and you need to work. If you don't do that, as I said, the country will not reap the benefits. So happy to see that transformation.
Look at LankaPay internally, right? What does it take, you think, to create a business that's globally competitive, that can, deal, negotiate, stand with big players in the region, right? It is what is it about the company and its culture, its strategy, its vision that has had to change?
Right. I mean, the whole series of points that you mentioned had to change.
Right.
From the people's approach to the company's vision, its branding guidelines. I think, so that the entire organization culture had to change. And we spent a lot of time at senior management level, at board level, and we got a very dynamic board, a very cooperative board, because it's a private sector gentleman sit on the board, plus the central bank. So they've been very supportive, and I think any initiative that I put on the table has been supported, and it's a great privilege to work with such a dynamic board and also the people in charge of transforming the organization. I particularly like to say that when we came to LankaPay, I think people are hungry for this type of transformation. They have been withheld for quite some time. There are talented people, had no opportunity. Opportunity was far and wide, and people looking at other jobs. We were not very attractive in terms of our comms package. So we had to look at all that. We had to change the benchmarking. We had to change the compensation that we were put into, and we learned from other industries. We brought some of the best practices from those other industries onto LankaPay, and we changed the entire organization culture from an HR start point. I think this term human resources is an arcane term, and it doesn't really fit well in an organization that is dealing in technology and that has kind of a dynamic nature in the organization and the technology space. So we rehashed HR, and we have got several consultants working with us to bring in an organization and development and talent management. So we have rebranded HR because it's not just the mere CV that you need to process. It's once you get people through the door, how do you motivate them? How do you look at their aspirations? What makes individual ticks matter? Each person, it's not one size fits all. That was HR 20 years ago, not anymore. If you don't look after the individual, he walks out that door, because this is the tech industry that we are in. So you have to have tailor-made solutions to different people, and we have done that. And I think people are. What I'm hearing is people are happy not only with the compensation, but overall transformation. And I think with that you get that dynamism to do better and look out. And that's the kind of message that we have put in as a senior management team, as a board. And we have done that incrementally over the last 2 years. This is the third year of that journey. And this is the first financial year which we are running the full-fledged chain transformation in terms of moving away from a legacy brand of Lanka Clear into LankaPay. And LankaPay has to have a more purposeful future. And as a result of that intention, we ensured that until such time the overall organization development and talent management function was in place, that we will not roll out the new brand guidelines and the new branding until that was in place. So we have done that, and we have also bought in new compensation package, I think on par with most of the Silicon Valley types of companies, which will make staff general to be participants of our success and to be owners. So there is a share option scheme that we have started. So all that is done, all that has been done, and all this kind of bodes well for the future of the employee in the organization, because we want them not to be feel as employees, but to be, to feel as if they own the company. And that's precisely why we bought the share ownership, so that they will drive this transformation. And I think there is merit in people when they see what's happening globally, and they know, looking at our interactions with our colleagues across the region, we know we can compete, and they know their strengths and weaknesses. So that gives them that edge. And I think we are safe to say that we are making steady progress, but there's a lot more work to be done.
So there's a sense of vision, but also a sense of confidence about what you are and what you're able to do.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, looking at what's happening on the ground, I mean, I talk to many people across different business verticals. I feel happy that people feel that there is some new energy in the system, in the company, and people are happy to take up more responsibility. But I must say that I made it very clear to the senior management team that execution is a must. You can't just put it down on paper and not execute. That's a definite no. And I'm a generally impatient person in that sense of of execution. If you put your timeline, you better ensure that it's delivered and there is no going back. So that's the culture we are trying to keep in the organization.
As you scale this and scale it globally, what role do partnerships play in this? Is that central to the strategy, or is it something that is good to have?
Oh, I think it's definitely central to a strategy. I mean, you can't do this on your own. There is no way that you can go global without a proper collaboration and partnerships. For that matter, you can't do it even locally. If you think that LankaPay can do any of these things locally, it won't happen. You have to have fintechs are coming up at a terrific rate, and there are some great fintechs in Sri Lanka who have a great dynamism and great passion to do well. I mean, even on the SME, even on the microfinance space, you find a lot of new fintechs coming up there and grabbing the space where there is a gap where the banks are not filling. Remember, there is a huge number of people, even in Sri Lanka, who are unbanked as yet, because they don't want to go to the banks, they want to fill KYCs and all that. There's a huge language barrier, so this language barrier has to be dealt with. Even in our ATMs, we see that people who withdraw, who use ATMs, use their own language. But Sinhalese and Tamil, because they feel afraid to press the wrong button, and then suddenly a transaction is done. And reversal is possible, but takes time. And once money is out of the door, it's out of the door. So that's something that people are cognizant about, and so the language is also important. Likewise, I think when you're going globally, you need to have a partner who gives you that guidance. And therefore, collaboration is a must, and partnerships, various forms of partnerships will happen. And we should be open to that, because you can't have a cookie cutter type of arrangement in place, right? So you must be open to multiple partnerships, and I think that's the culture we are trying to bring in, and I think the board also has recognized that.
You mentioned previously that when you went out there, you find that Sri Lanka's some of the products that you have are competitive regionally. If you look at the lay of the land in full, if you tell us where you think in general, in terms of payments and settlements, Sri Lanka stacks up against. Look at South Asia, look at Southeast Asia. Where do we stack up in terms of payments and settlements?
Yeah, in terms of a country, I mean, not really great, to be honest. Okay. In terms of the product capability and the technical capacity, we are up there. So there is this dichotomy.
Right.
right? I mean,
Right.
you got the products, don't have the usage.
Sure.
But the same products are used in other markets, and the usages are phenomenal, 400%, 300% growth.
Right.
So some strange reason it has not happened in Sri Lanka, and I think the main reason for that is multiple things. One is regulatory. I mean, so there is different countries, regulators push, governments push. So then that push translates into a tangible action from the consumer, because there are incentives, either fiscal incentives given to various stakeholders in these countries. So that enables. A classic case was India, where they demonetized and they made it compulsory for checks below a certain limit not to be accepted, and therefore checks completely disappeared, literally disappeared. So like that. But in Sri Lanka, we have not made a rule as such. Check clearing has drastically dropped, but it's still there. And likewise, QR, we have started it, but traction is poor. So there are multiple reasons for that. One is the touch points where consumers have to make purchase at their vendors. The vendors are still skeptical about the QR functionality. Banks also need to make money out of it. So there was initial push towards the merchant acquiring side to be restricted to 0.5%, which some of the banks say was not sufficient enough to recover their cost. But I think the intention was to keep costs low and entice merchants to use this, because there's cash. So I mean, it's a funny situation, because merchants also don't realize the value of having a QR, because as opposed to collecting cash and the risk they run in cash. So that education side of it is also a miss. I think we have to start doing this. We have had several discussions with the central bank and also the stakeholders in this country who are responsible for the QR ecosystem. And I think we will start seeing some good traction, because thanks to even the fuel QR, because people got wind of it, and now it's it's so convenient.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, there is no payment attached to it. So once you get that payment mechanism, we are trying to do that. There is a new product that we are developing called Pay Me. Once that comes in, I think then the fuel station can send a request and it'll come, and then you, from your own app, you can make the payment instead of taking your credit card out or a debit card. So we are moving towards that.
Kenneth, this has been a fascinating conversation. We've covered a lot of ground. Anything you think you need to add to round this off?
Well, I mean, to me, I think my just to share something personal to me, it was when I took over this job, I didn't know what I was getting into. So it was a kind of an open book that was in front of me, and I think we have written those chapters with time over the last 3 years fairly diligently and well. And I think that's something that I'm very happy to see that has happened. And I mean, as I said, it's a team effort. I mean, the team responded well. I mean, and that has been a privilege to be part of this journey. And I think we are seeing fairly good results now. I mean, in terms of our overall growth, there is a lot more that we have to do. And I think with time and with the next 2 years, I think that traction will come through. And I only hope that people in this country remain in this country, because that talent is so important for this journey. So we have to nurture this talent, look after this talent, because these types of technological savvy individuals and skill set is easily and very mobile and easily transportable. So if you lose it, you are in peril. So I think as a country, we need to ensure that this type of talent is retained in this country for the well-being of the citizens, as well as to ensure that we have a greater market access and we attract other countries into this payments and settlement system and have a more meaningful dialogue and open a bigger market. Because as I started off saying, we have just touched the consumer market, not the e-commerce as yet. The e-commerce from a B2C is a different ball game, and a B2B is a different ball game. The B2B is where the big bucks are. And if that happens, I think then Sri Lanka, being where Sri Lanka is in terms of a central location, we will benefit significantly from this entrepreneur type of activity, as well as businesses looking at Sri Lanka more seriously. We already have the infrastructure in place. We already have the port city infrastructure in place, which is untapped, right? So digital banking licenses coming in will make a big difference because the products are there. As I said, digital signatures are now in place. The legislation is in place. Now we have to ensure that we get to using this wisely and effectively to bring our costs down than trying to print on paper. So we need to get our actions also right, and with that transformation, if that transformation takes place, Sri Lanka will be better off.
Kenneth De Zilwa, thank you for joining us, and thank you for so clearly laying out the opportunity and the challenges in front of us in payments and settlements going global. Thank you.
Thank you, Shah.